Christopher Wren is known in England as one of the greatest architects in history. Christopher Wren was commissioned to rebuild St. Paul's Cathedral after the Great Fire of 1666 that leveled London. One day in 1671, Christopher Wren observes 3 bricklayers on a scaffold. One crouched, one half standing, and one standing very tall, working very hard and fast. To the first bricklayer, Christopher Wren asked the question, "What are you doing?" To which he replies, "I'm working. I'm a bricklayer." Totally disengaged. The second bricklayer, Christopher Wren asked the question, "What are you doing?" To which he replies, "I'm building a wall." Happy about that wall, but didn't see the big picture. The third bricklayer of the group, the most productive of the 3, the future leader of the group, the future county government leader of the group, when Christopher Wren asked the question, "What are you doing?" With a gleam in his eye, he exclaims, "I'm building a cathedral to the Almighty." That story has been told for over 300 years. The most productive people in life, in business, in your churches, in your communities, in state government, in local government, are those of purpose. So for the next 20 or 30 minutes or so, I'd like to ask you some questions. I'd like to ask you some questions as a county judge, as a magistrate, as someone in local government. How does this powerful 300-year-old story relate to you? First of all, what can we learn from the leadership of Christopher Wren? See, I didn't know much about Christopher Wren until I started embarking on the book, Building Cathedrals, The Power of Purpose. But Christopher Wren was an ideal leader. He was a Renaissance leader. Christopher Wren was commissioned to rebuild St. Paul's Cathedral after the Great Fire of 1666 that leveled London. So Christopher Wren was clearly an architect. He was an engineer. He designed devices to lift water. He was an astronomer. Sir Isaac Newton said that most astronomical equations should be attributed to guess who? Sir Christopher Wren. He was a medical doctor. Dr. Thomas Willis is known in medical circles as the father of neurology. And Dr. Thomas Willis was looking for someone to help draw illustrations of the brain. Guess who he recruited? A young Chris Wren. Matter of fact, it was Christopher Wren who injected alcohol into a dog's vein and noticed visible signs of intoxication. For the first time in the 1600s, realized we could inject drugs intravenously. So he was an architect, an engineer, an astronomer, a medical doctor. He was clearly left brain, like you all as county officials, but he was also right brain. See, Christopher Wren got out behind his desk when maybe he was too busy to get out behind his desk and asked folks, "What are you doing?" "Well, I'm working." "No, what are you really doing?" "Well, I'm a sheriff." "No, you're the most important person in this county. Thanks to what you do here in Marshall County or Simpson County or Hickman County, people can enjoy their freedom here." So the key question I ask you this afternoon, are you a Christopher Wren in your communities? Are you a Christopher Wren as a newly elected official who helps people in your community realize, "What are you doing?" "Well, I'm working." "No, what are you really doing?" "Well, I'm a magistrate." No, you provide leadership for this community. And there's never been a greater need for a Christopher Wren in county government, would you agree, in our United States? So we need someone out there to help them see the cathedral. So the key question I ask you this afternoon in county government, are you that Christopher Wren? The second question, what about the redemptive qualities of a fire? See, in life, you're either going to go through a fire, you're in a fire, you just came out of a fire. Everybody going through fires in here? And most folks will say what doesn't turn us into ash turns us into iron. And see, pre-1666, London was horrible. Prostitution, poor sanitation, 10,000 people a year died of the plague. The number one cause of the plague? Diseased rats and fleas. But after London burnt to the ground, guess what else was eradicated? Rats and fleas. And the leaders of London, the leaders of your community and county government, said, let's make this place the best it can be. And they did. So below your moniker of county government, guess what should be under there? Fire department. Would you agree you're in the fire business? And would you agree your counties very often have gone through those fires, but would you say your county, your community is better, stronger, and faster as a result? Most folks would. The third metaphor, what about a cathedral as a metaphor? And the way I define a cathedral this afternoon in my book, Building Cathedrals, The Power of Purpose, is a personal expression of purpose, a cathedral. God Almighty, number one. Your family, number two. Your county, number three. What about number 4 or 5? Tobacco. See, that's my dad's cathedral in Simpson County. And research shows, as the county judge in Simpson County, when Jim was down there, Jim Henderson, guess what? Jim Henderson saw my dad's tobacco as a cathedral. Luther Hammer at Simpson County Bank saw it. Before my dad passed away, he pulled out his wallet. He said, you remember this? And I'll show you a picture of that in a few minutes. Bill Coker stands on a tobacco patch on Lovin Chapel Road where he raised 15 acres of burley tobacco. That was my dad's cathedral. And my dad passed away 6 years. That's a fire you never get over. My dad would never have left Simpson County Bank. You know why? Because they built his cathedral. And my dad would have never left Simpson County because guess what? Simpson County built my dad's cathedral. So the key question I ask you is, do you see your county as a cathedral? Because if you don't, guess what? They're leaving. You know, Josh just talked about earlier ago, our economic development group are doing great things. You know why? Because when they get off the airplane, when Mike Buchanan, when they get off the airplane back there, you know what he talks about? Not Warren County at the very beginning. When they get off that airplane, they're going, how are you doing? Where'd you come from? How's your family? Where do you want to eat? Because see, basically, your emotional intelligence is a better predictor of success than your IQ. How many agree with that? And that's why Toyota's in Georgetown. Because Martha Lane Collins realized, guess what? The Japanese like firecrackers. And about 9:30 at night, Martha Lane opened up the window and the Japanese go, oh my God, they're firecrackers. Guess why Volkswagen's in Chattanooga, Tennessee? Because Lamar Alexander got on the piano and played my equivalent of my old Kentucky home in German. Closed the deal. But the key question in your communities, in your counties, do you see your counties as a cathedral? And research shows the more you support other people's cathedral, the more engaged they're going to be. And I have failed miserably at doing that. Because I'll go home tonight to see my wife and my daughter and my son, and they're going to say, Dad, how'd you do? You were so pumped up about Keiko. How'd you do? Oh, we're so proud of you, Dad. You know what they're basically saying? Ask about my cathedral. Because my daughter's a hairdresser. Oh, she doesn't cut hair. She said, Dad, I don't cut hair. I'm a lifesaver. You know the lady across the street in room 18? The only reason she's alive because her brother pays me $25 to cut her hair, and she's right. So when you go home tomorrow and you've had a lot of great things here at Keiko, guess what? Your significant other's looking at you going, ask about my cathedral. Because county loyalty is built at the cathedral builder level. So I'll ask you again, do you see your county as a cathedral? Because if you don't, guess what? People are going other places. And they're not because you see your county as a cathedral, and they'll never leave. And there's no greater example of a cathedral than, guess what? County government. And what Keiko does, the next metaphor, what about the 3 bricklayers? The first bricklayer, what are you doing? I'm laying brick, I'm a bricklayer. How many have felt that way before? How many felt that way this morning? I did. The alarm goes off at 4:30. Felt like a bricklayer. When I walk in this room right here, you don't want a bricklayer. You want a cathedral builder. And no matter what's going on in your counties out there, you may wake up feeling like a bricklayer. It's snowy, it's icy, maybe tonight, hopefully not. But guess what? When they walk into your county offices, they want a cathedral builder. So the first bricklayer, what are you doing? I'm laying brick. We've all felt that way before. The second bricklayer, what are you doing? I'm building a wall. I'm a magistrate. I'm a county judge. That's awesome, but it's not about that. The third bricklayer, the most productive of the three, the future leader of the group. What are you doing? I'm building a cathedral to the Almighty. So the key question I ask you this afternoon, which bricklayer are you? You're cathedral builders. And then the next metaphor, last but not leastly, is building cathedrals through touching and inspiring other people. See, I think we have the opportunity, no, I'd say we have the responsibility every day to touch people in a deep and meaningful way. Why don't we do it? What, you think I'm flirting with her? No, but I don't hang out there all day long. What, do you think I'm crazy if I tell them I love them? Because one of my best friends, Jim Flint, I love Jim. See, my dad never told me he loved me. My dad he was my biggest supporter. He was a good old boy from Tennessee, and I went to Western. I come home after taking a Kumbaya class. I said, Dad, I love you. You know what he said? Son, you need some more money? Well, guess what? My kids are born. Will and Abby get in his lap, and they said, Papa, I love you. What'd he say? I love you too. And then one day, the international drop-off point in Kentucky, Elizabethtown Cracker Barrel. How many dropped your kids off there before? And my dad picked them up one afternoon. He looked at me and said, Son, I love you. So I love you too, Dad. And my wife will say, are you going to give flowers to people while they're alive or at their funerals? Amen. Now, how many of us have looked down at funerals right now and go, why didn't I tell her that? Why did I tell him that? And see, as county officials, we have that opportunity every day. No, I think we have the responsibility every day to treat people and touch people in a deep and meaningful way. How many have read the book, The Energy Bus? If you've not, buy it. Because what it basically says, when I walk into your county offices, I feel the energy. And we've got that opportunity as county officials to make sure we just exude that energy of this community. So let's talk about Christopher Wren. I think Christopher Wren was a Renaissance leader. It's one of my favorite models right here. What it basically says is everybody that walks into your county government looks out of 4 windows of the world. 4 windows. They've got the drivers. You know them. They walk right in your office. They know exactly what they want. You know those folks. You got the analyticals. They'll walk in there with a shoebox with every tax assessment they've had in the last 37 years. Then you've got the expressives that walk in there going, oh my gosh, woo, baby. And then you got the angles that walk in going, I know you're all busy. With a key question, are you leading from all 4 of these? Because what I find very often as leaders, we manage or lead out of 1 or 2 of them. At churches, I'm a social scientist. I think most churches out there, the ministers, preach out of 2 of them. I didn't know my minister had legs a couple years ago. He stand behind the podium, this is the day the Lord has made. But guess what? The mega churches out there that look like the Bass Pro Shops, the 10,000 plus, they're preaching and out of all 4 of them. They got the drivers, the purpose, they've got the analytical, the outline, they're excited. There should be no one more excited about county government than guess who? You. And then the aimable is likability. See, the top part is credibility. The bottom part is likability. How many have been credible at the expense of being likable? I have. How many have been likable out there campaigning at the expense of being credible sometimes? I have too. And I think emotional intelligence are a blend of credibility and likability. Most importantly, authenticity. And I think Christopher Wren may have been the ideal leader. He's clearly left brain. He was an architect. He was an engineer. He's an astronomer. He's a scientist. He was a medical doctor. He was also right brain. He was an architect, an artist, a teacher like many of you all are. He's very modest. You don't hear much about Christopher Wren because he didn't patent anything. Someone tried to get him riled up and said, what do you think about him stealing your idea? You know what he said? I thought he did a pretty good job with it. He's what Jim Collins in the book Good to Great calls a level 5 leader. Do you have an ego? You better have an ego, but guess what it's about? Boyle County, not about you. About your county, not about me. He was also inspirational. And the question I ask you right now as a county official, how inspirational are we? Because that day only 2 people saw the cathedral. The first bricklayer saw brick. Second bricklayer saw a wall. The third one in Christopher Wren saw the dome, the mirage that wasn't there yet. Guess what? In your county business, they may not see the dome because it's a mirage right now. But in Shelby County with Judge Ice and other ones, you've got to help them see the dome. To our children, we've got to help them see the dome. He may have invented MBWA. You know what a managed by walking around is? Managed by walking around is where you walk out there on the county roads with a clipboard. You got to do that. That's compliance. Leadership by walking around is going out there with nothing done in your hands at all. Walking out there going, hey, I got some Gatorade for you all. You all are awesome. No offense to the county judge, but you're all the most important people here because guess what? You all are cleaning these roads up. That's who people see. That's Christopher Wren. That's leadership by walking around. So it's clearly management and leadership. Guess what? Warren Bennett said that most counties are overmanaged, underled. How many agree with that? And it's management and leadership, not management or leadership. It's and, not or. He was also visionary. And Josh talked about it. Governor Bevin talked about it. The vision of making your county the cathedral that it already is. What about the redemptive cause of a fire? London was horrible pre-1666. 430 acres totally destroyed, 13,000 homes, almost 90 churches. Loss of life, amazingly, was less than 20. Pre-1666, London was a very medieval town. Post-1666, London was a very modern city. We all have our personal fires, but like London, we too can emerge stronger, better, and faster. What are the key questions for you this afternoon? Number one, what fires have you had in your life? Everybody going through fires in here? What about county government? Everybody going through fires in your counties? Sure you have. Number two, how did you react? See, when I got fired from corporate America, I was recruited by a great leader and fired by a great manager. And when I point a finger at the guy that fired me, I got three coming right back at me. And what were my rats and fleas? Pride, ego, self-absorption. It was all about Greg Coker. I used to say I was a cathedral builder. I wasn't a cathedral builder. I worked for our governor, and if the governor walked in here, I'd knock you down to go see the governor. That's not a cathedral builder. A cathedral builder goes, no, why don't you go meet the governor? Why don't you go over and meet her? So how did you react? How do you wish you'd have reacted? And specifically, what caused you, what are those characteristics that helped you get those fires? Guess what? There's research been done on it. The 7 characteristics of people like you. The 7 characteristics of people like you who we call fire resistant. Number 1, they take personal control. They're empowered versus overpowered. And that's what we have to do in county government once we go through those fires. At some point, we've got to pick ourselves up as a county. I used to be on a local school board. We had horrible test results. Best thing that ever happened. Because it was that fire that made us better, stronger, and faster. At some point, we got to take personal control. We got to be empowered versus overpowered. Number 2 is we're task involved. We're purpose driven. At some point, we've got to get back out there, and hopefully they see our county as their purpose. Number 3 is they seek social support. They seek social support. You've got to get back in the ball game, help other people get back there. Number 4 is they make wise lifestyle choices and strive to be at their personal best. I know my fighting weight, and I'm about 15 pounds over. And if I'm going to lead my county, if I'm going to be out there, this cathedral that I'm selling, I got to be at my personal best. Number 5, they have a sense of humor. And I do a drug every day, it's called endorphin. Because every time you laugh and you have a good cry, guess what? Those are endorphins. They have a sense of humor. Number 6, they have religious values, ethical regard for the people. This is not a religious speech. Dartmouth, Harvard, MIT have all done studies. People who pray are sick less often. Folks who go to church get out of the hospital quicker. It's that doing to others. And lastly but not least is they're optimistic. They realize after this fire, they too, their county is going to be better, stronger, and faster. What about a cathedral as a metaphor? A personal expression of purpose. What's the key question? What's your cathedral? What's your cathedral? And that's the question I ask you today. There's no greater example of a cathedral than what you have in your counties, the 120 counties in our, from west to east, north to south. Wow, what a state we have. And economic development is at the cathedral builder level. That's why we're doing so well, is because when they come in here in Murray, in Pikeville, they see, oh my gosh, this is a cathedral. Number 2, do you recognize and support others in the building of their cathedral? Or you like me, if you torn them down. See, my dad was a factory worker. He was a tobacco farmer. I labeled him a bricklayer. Before he passed away, this is the article was in his wallet that I told you about earlier. Bill Coker stands on a tobacco patch on Love and Chapel Road. We raised 8 acres of burley tobacco, 40 hours plus. That was my dad's cathedral. I had been tearing it down for over 40 years. But guess what? The guy who wrote the article, James L. Hammer, Luther, Simpson County Bank, you know what he did before he was at Simpson County Bank? He was my FFA teacher at Simpson County High School. And James L. Hammer was brilliant. Once a month, he wrote an article about someone in his county who was building a cathedral. Now, Simpson County Bank is no longer there. It's Franklin Bank and Trust now. And when I moved back home, I banked at Franklin Bank and Trust. I tried to get Mom and Dad to move over to Franklin Bank and Trust because Simpson County Bank's now region. It's a good bank, but it's not locally owned. My dad wouldn't come. I said, Dad, your bank is not longer locally owned. You talk buy local. He goes, Greg, I'm not coming. You know why he wouldn't come? Right there. So the question asks you in your county, what type of opportunity in your counties do you have to promote the cathedrals that all of your people in your community are building? They'll never, ever leave your community. I'm not talking physically, but mentally. They'll be down there at the courthouse every time you need them because guess what? You built their cathedral. This is a picture of my dad's cathedral. Anybody grow up in a cathedral like that? A tobacco barn? I mean, look at the trusses and the workmanship. Christopher Wren would have been impressed with my dad. I had been tearing it down for over 40 plus years. So I'll ask the question again. Do you recognize and support others in the building of their cathedral? Is it time to start building your cathedral? And thank goodness for CACO and all the great work they do. This is what it's about. There's no great example of a cathedral as far as associations, what CACO and those guys and gals do. There's no great example of a cathedral than what you do in your counties. But is it time to rebuild that cathedral with maybe a little bit more passion, more energy, more dedication? What about the bricklayers in the story? See, Gallup does a poll every year. 20 years, the numbers rarely change. What it says is 26% of us are fully engaged. Guess what? You're the 26%. The 26% that are here right now, you're the 26%. On behalf of the governor and the president and everybody else, thank you for being the 26%. Because with 26%, you get cathedrals. With 26%, you get commitment. 55% are partially engaged. They're good people. They're good employees. They come to work on time. They give you a good day's work. They leave on time. Guess what? 26% you get commitment. You get cathedrals. 55% you get compliance. You get walls. 19% are totally disengaged. They moan. They groan. They complain. With 26% you get cathedrals. 55% you get walls. 19% you get bricks. You get moaning and complaining. Do you know folks like that? Not only in our employees, in our communities. Would you agree? 26%, they're there all the time helping you. 55%, they're good citizens. They don't come by there a lot. 19% are the ones that you're mad to meeting, complaining, moaning, groaning all the time. Every time. In our prison system, I do work at reentry. And Commissioner Irwin said, Greg, that's almost perfect. 26% will never be back. They've been rehabilitated. 55% sort of roll the dice. 19% guarantee about 6 months they're coming back. In our school system, 26% gifted and talented, 55% going through the motions, 19% bullies. Where does a teacher spend most of his or her time? Bullies, 19%. See, the 55% in our communities are looking for direction. And they're going to get it from you and me, the 26%, or the 19%. Guess who's more vocal and visible in our communities? You and me or the 19%? 19%. The second bricklayer can at least see the wall. What are the dynamics between the three bricklayers? Which bricklayer are you? Is it time to recommit? Is today the time to recommit to start seeing that cathedral, to be that 26%? Or is it time to help other people to be in that 26%? And lastly but not leastly is building cathedrals through touching and inspiring other people. See, I think we have the opportunity every day to touch people in a deep and meaningful way every day. What keeps from doing that? I went to Western Kentucky University. I'm going to the Kentucky ball game tonight. Oh yeah, 9 o'clock. I like Murray. I like University of Louisville. I love basketball. The best game in the history of Kentucky, history of the world, was that game right there. How many agree with that? That was 1983 NC State Houston Cougars. What you see is Jim Valvano run around the court. He'd won the national championship looking for somebody to hug. Couldn't find anybody to hug. I've never wanted to jump through a screen and hug someone right there. But the key question I ask you in your counties, who's out there running around your county looking for a hug? Maybe somebody that's got a new job that is drug-free now, that's just looking for somebody in county government or in your church and they're going, hug me. I'm back on top. I'm back in that 26% again. Well, guess what? 10 years later, Jim Valvano's dying of cancer. That's your homework assignment right now if you want to Google it. Because guess what? What you see there is Jim Valvano's dying of cancer. 10 years later, I have lunch with Dick Vitale in Louisville, the Kentucky Derby Festival. He said, Greg, I was there that night. I thought he'd speak 3 minutes. He's receiving the Arthur Ashe Humanitarian Award. He spoke about 12 minutes. He was about 85 pounds. He died about a week or two later. I'll never forget what he said. He said, if I had to do all over again, 3 things. My dad, we checked him at the medical center in Bowling Green on Monday, died on Thursday, eaten up with cancer. Had no idea. I'd give anything. I saved 2 of his voicemails on my phone right now. I listen to him every day. I'd love to say, Dad, what would you do? 3 things you would do. And Jim Valvano basically summed it up. 3 things. Think, laugh, have my emotions move to tears. Think, laugh, and cry. And at 54 years old, I can't tell you I wasn't nervous back there because it's a big group. I was nervous. But I'm not worried about being nervous anymore. You know what I'm worried about? Crying. Because I'm a lot more in touch with my emotions at 54 than I was at 34 or 44. And Jim Valvano says, think, laugh, have my emotions move to tears. And I'm in Danville, Kentucky, working with Greg Cottle at Farmers National Bank, and I'm walking across the street, and Greg's looking all good with his 3-piece suit on. A big hairy dude, sweaty, walks out of a restaurant, jumps on top of him, kisses him right in the face. He goes, I love you, Daddy. He goes, I love you too, Bruce. See, Bruce's son has autism. And as soon as that happened, a big tear rolls right down my eye. He looked at me and said, he has that effect on a lot of people. That's a beautiful day right there. Think, laugh, and have our emotions move to tears. Number 2, touch other people. We have the opportunity every day to touch people in a deep and meaningful way. Why don't we do that? That's that book, The Energy Buzz. If you've not read that yet, pick that book up because what it basically says is we've got energy, and that energy touches people automatically. Number 3, help other people realize what they do makes a difference. In graduate school, I took the hardest class in business school. Had an A going to the final exam. I didn't have to go take the final. I had to make like a 30 and make an A. I said, no, I'm going to go take the final. So I took the 3 number 2 pencils in there. Remember the blue books? The professor hands out the blue book. 1 question on the test. You know what it was? What is the man's name who cleans our building? I didn't know. I made an F on the test. Now, I cursed that guy for a long time, but in retrospect, it was the best leadership lesson I could have ever learned. No offense to county judges in here or magistrates or whatever you do, you're not the most important person in your county. You know who is? The person that cleans your floor. Because that's the first person they see. That's the first person. Now, guess what? In the school system, I work with a lot of school systems. The superintendent, no offense to her or him, they're not the most important. The bus driver is. Because when I'm on Macedonia Road, a poor kid, 6 years old, and Mr. Hopkins on bus 29 opens that bus, throws that dirty T-shirt up, he goes, young man, help me wash that windshield off. That windshield didn't need wiping off. He knew I needed a purpose. And that's the most important person. Help other people realize what they do makes a difference. Number 4, send handwritten notes. How many have personal stationery? Go back and buy some. When I started my business 6 years ago, I was on my game. Every night I'd write about 10 or 11 cards. Man, my arms, when you ran for election, did you do that? Yeah. But all of a sudden now, been 6 years, I'm doing pretty good. I got lazy. Well, guess what? About 3 weeks ago, I went back and bought me 100 new stationery. And last night I wrote 3 of them. Tonight I better write 3 or 4 more. Because people are touched. The cathedral builder is built by that handwritten note. Ask other people to tell you their story. Everybody's got a story. Most people want to tell you your story. Whose story we've been telling? Our story. In heaven, I hope there's 3 things. I hope there's hot water, I had a bad back. Hope there's newspapers, because I love to read the newspaper, even though I read online most of the time. And I hope there's a shoe shine stand. Because I love going to a nice hotel or an airport to pull my leg up and get my shoe shine. Well, guess what? I'm in Washington, D.C. at the Hyatt Regency. I see a sign that says, shoe shine man downstairs. And I go down there and get my shoe shine. But he wasn't there. It said, be back in 15 minutes. So I got time, so I got my USA Day out. I pull my pant leg up on that big throne. All of a sudden, United States Senator walks in. We're in Washington, D.C. United States Senator walks in. I said, well, he must want his shoe shine too. He took his top hat off, his gloves off, his overcoat. He was looking good. He kneeled right in front of me. And he said, I'm here to shine your shoes. And I said, you, United States Senator, going to shine my shoes? He goes, I'm not the United States Senator. He said, I'm the shoe shine man. You listen to NPR? And I said, yeah, occasionally. He said, Google NPR shoe shine man. I'm the shoe shine man. So he starts shining my shoe. But it's all about Greg Coker, because I got an agenda, so I'm reading my newspaper. But about 2 or 3 minutes into it, I said, shame on me if I can't take time to shut my agenda and ask that guy to tell me your story. And thank goodness I did, because what a cathedral builder had at my feet. I said, tell me your story. So I grew up in New York City. I dated a young lady whose father was the shoe shine man at LaGuardia. He comes home one day. We're on the front porch. He said, young man, you want to help me start shining shoes at LaGuardia? Because I didn't think about it that much, but yeah, we'll help you. He said, by the time I'm a junior in high school, I'm making more money shining shoes than most are in a full-time job. J. Edgar Hoover was looking for minorities in the FBI. He said, I get recruited. I go to the FBI. I want to be an agent. They put me in the back office after I got out of the academy to be an analyst because he was so smart. He said, I can't touch people back in the office. I see a sign across the street, the Hyatt Regency, say shoe shining needed. He said, I started shining shoes after 5 years. I quit the FBI. I've been shining shoes for 35 years. Put 5 kids through college. At night, I'm also the night manager at U.S. Airways at Dallas Airport. Wow. And I was this close to missing a cathedral builder story. So the key question for you as a county official, do we stop to be able to ask other people, what's your story? Everybody's got one. Most people want to tell you their story. Never underestimate the amazing power or responsibility of being a leader. Who do you think they're talking about over the dinner table? You. They're talking about you. Right now they're talking about you. And you've got the opportunity to touch people in a deep and meaningful way. Have a yes face. Thomas Jefferson riding cross country on horseback comes across a swollen river. The bridge has been washed out. There's a man on the river's bank who needs to ride across the river. He looks around at all the modern-day Secret Service on horseback and Thomas Jefferson. He looks around. He walks right to Thomas Jefferson. He said, can I ride across the river? Thomas Jefferson said, yeah, hop on the horse. He hops on the horse, goes across the river, jumps off, wipes the water off. Thomas Jefferson trots away. The modern-day Secret Service scolds the guy. How dare you could have asked any of us to ride across the river. You asked the President of the United States. You know what he said? First of all, I didn't know he's President of the United States. Second of all, some people in life have a no face, some have a yes face. I went to the yes face. So the key question I ask you in county government, when I walk into your office, do you have a yes face like you? Then I'm going to walk up and go, man, tell me about this county. I'm thinking about moving here. Or do you have a no face? No offense, hope there's nobody named Linda in here. When I was on the school board in my hometown and you walked in there and Linda was working, it was like, oh, Linda. How many have a Linda in your office? No offense, hope there's nobody named Linda in here, but guess what? Very often my face says no. I don't mean for it to because I get in a management mode when somebody walks into county government and they're looking for you to have the yes face. Forgive and reconcile. Dan Cherry, General Dan Cherry, Bowling Green, Kentucky, good friend of mine. He and I worked together in the Patton administration. He retires, but before he retires, he tells me a story. He said, Greg, one day I'm in Vietnam. I'm flying my fighter jet. I look to my right. I see a Russian MiG airplane coming right at me. He said, I bank right. I put my finger on that guided missile, blow the plane up. It was my first score. I said, wow. He said, before I blew the plane up, though, the Vietnamese pilot parachuted out. He said, I flew right by him. I looked him dead in the eye. I saluted him. I flew away. I said, you didn't kill him? He goes, we don't kill pilots, Greg. We down airplanes. Sometimes, unfortunately, pilots die. Well, some 35 years later, he's in Bowling Green, and his cathedral now is the Aviation Heritage Park. You may go there. I went there last weekend. There's about 15 planes there now. At the time, there were no airplanes. And his buddy said, hey, Dan, won't you, let's go to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio, look for some airplanes. We get to Bowling Green. They went up there, and somebody there knew that General Dan Cherry, retired Air Force, was there. And they walked up to him. They said, there's an airplane, not here, about 30 miles down the road, a dilapidated VFW. They're having a tough time keeping up. You all might want to go look at it. We think it might have some Kentucky influence out of it. Guess what? They went down there. And Dan Cherry was looking, and he said, what if it's your plane, Dan? He goes, it's not my airplane. If it was my airplane, it'd have 550 on the tail fin. Guess what? Amid bird poop and weeds, they opened it up, and guess what they saw? 550. Dan Cherry had reconnected with the airplane he used in Vietnam to shoot the Vietnamese pilot down. They said, Dan, can we get that airplane back to Bowling Green? He said, I don't know if we can, but guess what? Cathedral builders don't see obstacles, they see opportunities. And 6 months later, on a new flatbed truck with a new paint job, guess what? That airplane now is in Bowling Green. And they said, Dan, what about that guy you shot down? He said, I think about him every day. I think about he's alive, number one. Number two, does he have a grandson like I do? Guess what? He started doing research. 3 months later, he's in Vietnam. He appears on a TV program, and he reconnects with the guy he shot down. They become good friends. He writes a book called My Enemy, My Friend. He comes back to Kentucky with Dan. He said, Dan, before you shot me down, I shot down an American. I wonder if he's still alive. Does he have a grandson like you and I do? He did. They found him in Detroit. They were on CBS News, and Steve Hartman said it's like the war never happened. The power of forgiveness, the power of reconciliation. And I am convinced most organizations, you know, form, storm, norm, perform. Most county governments go through form, storm, norm, perform. And if your county was at perform and you just got elected, guess what? You just took it down to form. Because whenever there's a new change in leadership, whenever there's a new employee, somebody retires, you go back down to form. And the irony of storm is you'll never get to norm unless you go through storm. But there's a right way and a wrong way to go through storm. You attack issues, not people. But I think most county governments, most organizations are stuck in storm for numerous reasons. One reason I think so is because of lack of forgiveness and reconciliation. Because forgiveness is a choice, not an emotion. Forgiveness is a choice, not an emotion. If you wait till you feel like forgiving that person that ran against you, you won't do it. And guess what? Reconciliation does not necessarily mean resolution. See, I think most folks finally forgive, but they rarely reconcile because they think reconciliation means, guess what? You got to talk about what happened. You don't. The guy that fired me stole closure for 6 years. I didn't sleep for 6 years at night. Because guess what? He thought reconciliation would mean resolution. It didn't. We finally reconciled because we didn't talk about the crap. So what I suggest, you got to forgive, you got to reconcile, but guess what? You don't have to talk about the past. And be a parachute packer. In the foreword of my first book, Charlie Plumb. Charlie Plumb was in the military also. He was in Vietnam. He was a fighter pilot. He didn't have the same luck Dan Cherry did. He got shot down. He spent 6.5 years in a POW prison camp. He was beaten and tortured every day for 6.5 years. He gets out. He's having a steak dinner in Kansas City. His wife's left him. That's what all the experts said is that you tell your wife, hey, listen, your husband's probably not coming back alive. He'll probably be in a body bag, but if he comes back alive, he's not going to be right. You need to move on. So she moved on. So he's by himself. He didn't blame her. He's by himself having a steak dinner. He sees some guy staring at him. Guy kept staring at him. He goes, what's he staring about? So finally he got up and walked over to my friend Charlie Plumb and pointed at him. He said, you're Charlie Plumb. He said, yeah, I'm Charlie Plumb. He said, you're Captain Charlie Plumb, retired last year. You flew fighter jets in Vietnam. You flew off the USS Kitty Hawk. You were shot down last December, or 6 years ago last December. You were beaten and tortured every year. You got released last year. He goes, how do you know all this? He looked down at me and said, because I packed your parachute that day. I packed your parachute that day. So the key question that Charlie Plumb asked in the foreword of my book, who packed your parachute? Mr. Hopkins on bus 29 packed my parachute. The judge in Simpson County, Bud Grow, and those guys packed my parachute. All of you all have packed my parachute in some way or fashion in your counties. But the other key question is, whose parachute are you packing? Whose parachute are you packing? Maybe that new person that's in your office is driving you crazy, asking you all these questions. But guess what? One day she's going to look and go, thank you for packing my parachute. And then lastly but not least, don't ever forget that you're a cathedral builder. There's no greater example of a cathedral than what you all do every day. But lastly, before we close, is be careful not to give them the whole load. And I feel like that's what I've done for you in the last 35 or 40 minutes, giving you the whole load. My grandfather was a Baptist minister, and he said, Greg, one day I get asked to be a guest minister in Tennessee. He said, I'm all pumped up. I start doing research way before the internet. I study, but guess what? Just like probably tonight, it starts snowing, and 1 inch turns into 3 inches, and 3 into 6, and 6 into 9. It's like they never got there. I pull out that old country church in Tennessee, nobody there. He's like, son of a gun. I did all that research, ain't nobody here to hear my sermon. But he walks in the church, but guess what? On the front row, guy must have walked. Old farm from Tennessee. Sitting there with those bib overalls on, old farm cap. You know the look. And he walks up to him like, well, I guess we're not going to have a sermon because there's only one of you. And the guy looked at my grandfather. He said, I don't know a lot. I'm just an old farm from Tennessee. But I know one thing. If I'm in my barn, only one horse comes to feed, I'm going to feed it. So my grandfather says, this guy wants a sermon. So he gets behind the pulpit. He said, I start going to town. He said, everything's just clicking. The stories are going great. I look at my watch. It's been going an hour and a half, nowhere near being done. He said, I better wrap this thing up. So he said, he wrapped it up. About 2 hours later, he wrapped up. He wiped the sweat off his brow. He walks down there to get some feedback. The guy has not moved, just sitting there. He walked up to him like, well, what do you think? And he goes, I don't know a lot. I'm just an old farm from Tennessee. But I know one thing. If I'm in the barn, only one of my horses come to feed, I'm going to feed it. But I'm not going to give it the whole load. So I feel like what I've done this afternoon is giving you all the whole load. But it's the whole load, I think, that's going to take your county to the next level. Thank you all for what you do, and never forget your cathedral. Thank you.